welcome to Janette's I'm Every Woman TV. I'm your host, Janette Burke. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We call it Funny Women and Funny Girls. It's our Women in Comedy segment. I'm about to have Janice Israeloff on my show today. She is a comic. You might know her. She's been very prominent the last 2 and a bit years on the Toronto comedy scene, Absolute Comedy, all kinds of festivals, fringe festivals with her One Women show. She's been in Kingston, she's been in Ottawa. She's really making it big, a big name for herself. She's out almost every night doing some kind of comedy act, and we're so happy to have her with us today. Welcome, Janice.
Hi, it's good to be here.
It is, and you know, this is a special event. I should mention this to the audience that we are actually here at Yuck Yucks in downtown Toronto on Richmond Street, and we're here for a special event called the Jewish Comedy Festival, and Janice is going to be performing tonight. So we're going to interview her first, and then we're going to get some cutaways of her on stage. So Janice, I know that you have a background of 30 years in acting. You were also a clown. You worked during the day helping patients with Alzheimer's, and you're a comedian by night. What made you want to switch from doing traditional acting and even clown work to comedy, and what skills have you been able to apply?
Well, a couple of years ago, I found that I was getting cast less as an older woman, and I didn't really like the roles I was getting cast in. I have a lot of things to say, I have a lot of opinions. I like to make people laugh, and so I took a comedy class, and they learned at a comedy bar. I took a comedy class, and at the end of the class, they help you write a set. And so I wrote a set about my work with Alzheimer's patients. And I did the set, and I love comedy because you can speak your true voice. I don't have to worry about I can just be me, and it was great. And so I just kept doing it.
I've been told by Mayim Bialik, who actually interviewed once, we all know her from The Big Bang, Blossom, what have you, that comedy is actually tragedy times 2, and that it's even harder to do than dramatic acting. Can you comment on that, please, for me?
I definitely agree. It is much harder because you have to have the right timing. It's just harder. I don't know. Making people laugh is harder because it's harder to make people laugh than it is to make them cry.
Do you find that audiences today have a certain threshold for comedy as to what they find funny and what they don't?
Well, we're living in a very tricky time of what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say. So there's a lot of conversations and discourse, as it were, in the comedy arena in terms of censorship. But I believe that you can make anything funny if it's funny. If you're not punching down, if you're not like putting down another group just to make them feel bad, so that if you're not being a bully. So if we are living in that kind of a sensitive time. Certain things are funny in certain generations. If you even look back at early comedy, the things that were funny then, you're like, ooh, they're so sexist. Those jokes are not funny anymore. So now we have different times that we're living in. So you have to sort of go with the flow of the times that you're in. And
so one of the things that interested me about you when I was doing some research on you and how you perform the content, the type of content you perform, a lot of your jokes stem around being a mom, aging, 55 plus woman, the work that you do with Alzheimer's patients, though I'm not quite sure how you make that funny, but I guess I'm going to find out a little bit later when you take the stage tonight. These are pretty pertinent female topics, as most often the case is that, we are the moms, we're the ones dealing with aging, we're also the ones in the sandwich generation taking care of elderly parents, some of whom have Alzheimer's disease. So some of the things you talk about are very female-oriented topics. How is that because they mean something to you more than just being funny, or they're just like a big part of your life?
The things I talk about are true to my soul. The things that keep me up at night, like my kids, wondering where they are, wondering if they're safe, comparing, crazy situations to things that I find difficult. I also talk about being Jewish. I talk about that experience.
Yes, I want to
that is
ask you about
something.
that
Yeah,
too.
that is something. Everything that I talk about on stage is just true to my own life, and I like to bring light to it, so that at the end of the show, you know, if someone comes up to me like, oh, you said that, it was so funny the way you said it, it was dark but it was funny, and so they walk away from that feeling good, and that's my point, is to, you know, make at least one person in the crowd walk away feeling better.
You're Jewish, and being Jewish is a big part of the content that you put out in your show. How important is it to you to be Jewish and to get a message through comedy about being Jewish and some of the experiences you've had as a Jewess?
I think that it's very important at this time in history, especially. I've always felt really strong about being a Jew. I've always stood up for myself. Grew up in Montreal, experienced anti-Semitism. My dad was from Israel. He was an Orthodox Jew, came from Israel in 1948. He was always marching for, you know, free the Jews from Russia back in the 60s and 70s. So I grew up in a very, very strong Jewish family, to be strong, be proud of who you are. And I feel that's really important. I find that not only Jewish people like my comedy, but other groups as well. They're like, you know, give me props, and yeah, it's very important to me to, you know, to make that funny, to make those difficult topics funny. Like, you know,
so
people
there's
are
a
like,
book out called Difficult Conversations. So, you know, you're taking difficult conversations and turning them into difficult, humorous conversations, and they must be much more easy. Like, it's easier to have a humorous slant on a difficult conversation than it is to just be like, let's have a difficult conversation and broach this subject matter.
yeah, sometimes it's hard to make it funny without being too, like, it's like a TED talk. You know, you want to
Yes.
broach the subject, but there's still the joke, there's the setup, there's the punch, there's the twist. I mean, there's the technicalities of comedy. So you have to.
How long does it take you to put content together for a show?
It's weird. I'll be driving in my car and I'll just get an idea, you know, and then I'll think about it all day, and I'll go home and I'll write it down. And sometimes I'll have to research the idea. And
so then how do you take it from that stage to actually making it funny? How do you know that it will be perceived as funny? Because it sounds like, oh, well, this is an issue. It's kind of technical. It's worked out into sort of like a speech, a humorous speech. But how do you know it's going to be receptive?
Because I follow the rules of comedy, that it has to like, there's the setup, and then there's the punch, and then there's the twist, and then I look for funny words or images, and I put it all together, and then I try it at open mics around the city. I go to open mics every night. We try our material, the comics, we get up there, we try it. Usually open mics are mostly other comics, which are the most difficult audience, because they've heard your shtick a million times, and they don't think anything's funny, because all they do is listen to people that think they're funny.
Feedback for you.
But if comics are laughing, especially like most of the rooms that those open mics are millennials, and they're mostly guys, 25-year-old guys. A lot of them talking about their penises. So I'm getting up and doing my mom jokes. But there are also a lot of rooms now that are starting out that are female forward rooms, and LGBTQ plus rooms, and those are really great rooms to try out your comedy, because then you're sort of on the same page, and they'll get your jokes. So you try that out, you try it out, and then you just you do your material at a show, and you have to risk, you know, a smaller show, and you just try out your new material at a show, and you hope it goes over well. And if it doesn't, you don't do it again. And if it does, you keep doing it. The more you do it, you also discover things when you're performing. Sometimes something will happen and you'll improv, and that will be funny, so that becomes part of your act.
Yeah, so I'm happy to see more women in comedy, which I believe, you know, comedy was mostly a male-dominated area for a long time. Front runners who've paved the way include, I guess, Joan Rivers, Phyllis Diller, and even more so today, there's all kinds of female comics, Joy Behar. Who are your influences, and what effect did they have on you and your content?
When I was growing up, I used to, particularly in the 80s, watch Joan Rivers a lot.
I liked her too.
And I love her. But my influences really would just be my mom and the funny people in my family. I come from a funny family, like, we're always joking around. My mother, when she had breast cancer, she was going into the operating room. They were going to remove her breast. She goes, "You want me to have half a chicken with that? Or you want it to roasted, toasted fries?" She was joking as they were wheeling her in.
You get some humor from your mother.
I got from my father. He was always the life of the party. He was the guy that would put the lampshade on his head. I mean, cringe when I was a kid. I'd plots, hide. But so I come from a funny family. So as well as having role models that are celebrities, I come from a history of funny people. My generation, my parents' generation, really did experience a lot of like the Depression and the war and anti-Semitism and things like that. So they went through some tough stuff, and they learned to deal with it through humor. And so that's what I did, and I've always done that. I was a class clown, in school. And
well, it's working for you going into year 3, and you've done amazingly well. I know your history. I read it in the bio at the top of the show of all the success you've had with all the fringe festivals and the one-woman shows and the comedy, the absolute comedies that you've done all across Canada, U.S., whatever. So much more continued success to you. Have a great show tonight here with the Jewish Comedy Festival. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And before I let you go, tell me what's coming up for you and whatever you want to plug. We call this the Shameless Promotion moment.
I will be performing at Absolute Comedy in Kingston, Ontario, August 7th. And I will also be back at Absolute Comedy in Toronto, August 28th. And if you're brave enough to go to an open mic in Toronto, you can see me performing at an open mic. And that's every night of the week. So
great. Okay, so thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for being with us today. As always, we would love for you to share us with all the amazing women in your life, and maybe even some men too. We love the feedback that you want to share on our episodes. We love to cover women's topics. You will find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Pinterest, Google+, Vimeo, you name it, we're there. You can find out more in the links below. And until next time, continue to be fabulous. This is Janette Burke, your host, signing off for Janette's I'm Every Woman TV.